Romantics, episode 28. We're so glad to be talking to you guys again. We took last week off, and we are so ready to dive back in with some amazing content. The body of this episode is our absolutely incredible interview with Vanessa Coffey, who is the intimacy coordinator for amazing shows like Outlander, Blood of My Blood, and the Buccaneers. So exciting to talk to her. This truly is an interview you don't want to miss. I mean, they all are interviews you don't want to miss, but this one was like new heights of excited for me. Like, it was absolutely incredible. So we'll dive into that soon. And then, of course, we have some updates to get through because there's a couple real big pieces of news. So let's dive into it, Deb.
It's so funny how you said like new heights, and I was like, hee hee.
Did not even mean to, no pun intended, but I'm here for it.
I love it. It's so good. Yeah, like there's so much to talk about, and it's so funny. Like one of the big things we're gonna talk about, like spoiler alert, Taylor Swift got engaged. Um, it's so funny because when that news broke last week, my boss was like, "When are you recording?" I was like, "It's a break week this week." She's like, "That's a bad time to have a break," and I was like, "Yeah, it is." But you know what? We've got like we let it simmer, right? So now we're gonna like regroup, and now we can talk about it in a calm, civilized manner ish. So yeah, there's lots to talk about, and I'm excited to be back.
Yes, it's so fun. Well, that feels like a great thing to talk about first. So, how did you come upon the news that Taylor's engaged?
I was in a meeting. It's so funny. I was in a meeting, and it was just a one-on-one, so it wasn't like a big group setting. But I was just like checking in on Instagram as I do. And then I saw like this beautiful like floral picture, and I was like, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. And then I like zoomed in and I yelled. And my boss, or yeah, I guess she's my boss's boss. She was like, "What?" I was like, "Taylor Swift got engaged." Like it was exactly like the Swiftie reaction. I like swiveled in my chair. I was like, "Oh my God." Yeah, it was a very raw and safe space to have this reaction, but she wasn't a Swiftie. Like she doesn't
Right.
hate, she appreciates Taylor, but it was a one-sided reaction for the most part. But it was good. I was so excited. But yeah, how did you find out?
Oh my gosh, so mine was different. I was sitting, we were doing training, right, it was our, like, the day before we got back to school. And so I am in a room with all of my coworkers from K through 12. Like all of the teachers are in the same room. And I'm sitting at a table and I'm being a good kid and am not on my phone. And she's my mentor teacher. Like she's the teacher who taught me to be a teacher when I was still in college. She is at my table with me and she goes, "Cassie." And I'm like, she hasn't called me Cassie since like I'm Cassandra. Like after I graduated, I was like, that's the thing. And so she's like, "Cassie." And I was like, I feel like I'm in trouble. I was like, "What?" And she goes, "Did you see Taylor Swift is engaged?" Did not believe her. Did not believe her. I was like, "What? No." And I grabbed my phone and she goes, "Yeah, Sadie texted me." Sadie's her daughter who I used to have in class. And I was like, "No." And my hands are like shaking as I opened Instagram and I pulled it open and there it was. First thing. Didn't have to search for it. Obviously, of course, that was going to be the first thing that was there. I started like shaking and like making like very quiet shrieking noises, and I started to like almost fall out of my chair. I had to like move myself so I didn't like my body was not holding its internal structure. And I was freaking the fuck out like so bad, and I was like, I don't care, there are like 80 other adults in this room with me. I was like, I don't care. I cannot believe I wasn't there with my kids because my kids would have understood. But whatever. I had to be there with a bunch of adults who were boring. But I was like freaking out, and one of my other teachers, she just looks at me and she goes, "I'm so glad I was here to see this." Thanks. So
I
yeah.
Yeah. They should be so lucky. They should be so lucky to witness such an event.
Yeah. So that was wild. And then I had to sneak into the school bathroom to record a thing of me freaking out to be like, guys, I'm reacting. Like I'm having big feelings. I was like, do you know how hard it was to not cry when I saw that? And it to be like, your English teacher and your gym teacher are getting married. I felt that so deeply as an English teacher. I was like, are you fucking joking? Like, I died.
The caption for all captions. So high school, and that caption, I was like, oh my God. Ugh. I know. I have chills just like talking about it, and it's been like a week and a half. I'm like, not over it, but that's a good story. Literally the opposite story. But I love that. And honestly, like, it is so funny how many text messages and DMs that I got, and I'm sure you did too. And it's like, you swear that we got engaged. And
Yes.
I'm so happy for you. Like, thank you. I'm so happy too.
Yes. That's what I was like, this is a bigger deal. Like, more people are excited for me in this moment than they are, yeah, if I'm actually getting married. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, it is arguably more exciting for me.
Honestly, yeah. I was like, this is it. This is peak happy. Like,
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it truly was everything. And like I told you quickly like after it happened because like suddenly like my worlds were like intertwining because I was like in a meeting and then I went into another meeting that was like a bigger meeting like with marketing and sales. And then the CEO of the club comes in, literally bursts into our meeting, and he's like, okay, so the president of the league wants us to do a $19.89 ticket offer for our Y2K night in 2 nights. How quickly can we pull this together? And I was like, it's almost like I just sprawled everywhere. I was like, I was born for this. No problem. No problem. He's like, newsletter tonight? I was like, no problem. Graphic, no problem. I will do anything for this promotion. So I was like, what is my job right now? Literally, my job was to make a 1989 inspired graphic to sell tickets inspired by Taylor Swift. And then 2 nights later, at the game, we were at halftime being like, Taylor Swift got engaged. And we blasted Love Story. Like, it was insane. I was like, this is peak career for me, I think. I've made it.
yes. Well, and I love that so much to be like that. I mean, obviously, you're in a women's sport, and the idea that you don't have to reject femininity and the things that are like peak girlhood to be at the highest echelon of what has previously been considered a male dominated field. Like, you can still be screaming Love Story at the top of your lungs at halftime and then go be a badass on the football pitch and be like, you know, kicking ass and taking names. And that is girlhood. That is a part of girlhood. And that's not a thing reserved for masculinity. And so, like, yes, let's scream about Taylor and the engagement and then go play some soccer. And I love it.
And you know what? The like cherry on top of this is that we won 5-0. Like,
Amazing.
fuck yes. Fuck yes. In the pouring rain. It was like a Taylor Swift song.
Oh,
Truly.
yeah. Did somebody run into the stands and kiss their significant other?
Not that I know of. But, you know, there was a lot of like, well, actually our supporters group made like these heart sunglasses with like, they were like bedazzled with friendship bracelet, like letters on them. Like everything was just Taylor. So
Cute.
we're like, every match we need to embody Taylor Swift and we will win the league. We will win the whole thing. So
Exactly. The spirit of Taylor will fill you. That's amazing.
exactly. Yeah, it was a great time. It was a great week for me personally and professionally.
And it was a great week in the Bridgerverse too, because we got some pretty massive news. So we heard something very big about season 5.
I know, it's so exciting. Pretty much confirmation that season 5 is going to start filming in the spring of 2026. And like for anybody who's like not looking at a calendar right now, that's like in what, like 6, 7 months? Like
Yeah.
that is very soon. So what do we think about that?
Well, okay. So I lost my mind because that's insane. Um, but also it makes a ton of sense. Like if we look at the timeline that we have been expecting and it's coming out and season 4 is coming out in February and March or like late January, late February, right in that little chunk of time, it makes sense for them to pick up filming in like March or April. And so springtime makes a ton of sense for this. So I mean, hearing that that is in the production magazines, that that's on the books, extremely exciting, especially considering that that's a very fast turnaround from season 4. But it seems like they're really trying to get it out fast to us. So thrilled, excited beyond measure, but it makes sense. It works with the timeline.
I love that. Every little piece of information we get just fits perfectly. Does not make us doubt our timeline whatsoever. So yeah, it totally makes sense. The same thing happened with season 3 promotion. They got through the promotion, and like a couple of weeks, a month later, they were already in production, like filming the season. Like we're not talking like pre-production, like full on like boots on the ground filming. So it makes sense, you wrap up, the promotional tour, all whatever that encompasses, and then right back where you need to be to get the next one, rolling. So that's really exciting, and again, just really solidifies our theory that very soon in 2026 we are going to get season 4.
Yes. Well, and one of the things that made me the most excited too, which I don't think I've talked about this on the podcast yet, but I'm taking a tour to England. I'm taking people, which by the way, there are spots left, so check my page and DM me if you want a link on Instagram at Cass Moran. But I am taking people. We're going, I partnered with Michelle, Jet Setting with Michelle, and we're going to tour the Bridgerton sets as well as some other places in London and Bath in late March, early April. So that fits right with the timing. So my fingers were so crossed when we set that time, where I was like, maybe we will be able to be at the sets when they are actually filming. And that is a very strong possibility at this point. So I am losing my mind. Come join us. We do have some spots left. So come along with us and see all of this, because I'm losing it. It's going to be so incredible. And I think there's a really decent shot we see some actual filming.
Oh my gosh, 100%. And I will be so unwell if you see Ranger House with the flowers. Please. Even if it's from far and it's just like
Yes.
anything would be so incredible. So
Yes.
that the timing is immaculate. I'm obsessed with that for you guys.
Yeah. It's going to be absolutely incredible. I'm beyond excited. So, yes. So fingers crossed.
So exciting. Oh my goodness. Big news. Huge news. And I mean, I feel like every few months we have this conversation, but how are we feeling about who's going to be season 5?
I am still very strongly Francesca and Michaela.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, I think that it's a possibility that it's Eloise and Philip. Like, that's never, like, they are still the default, like, what we suspect. And, like, what's on Netflix, the people that broke that season 5 is filming in spring, that's kind of what they're assuming as well. They don't have any inside information on it. But they're like, we just kind of assume that it's going to be Eloise and Philip. And I think that that's the assumption. I don't think that's a bad assumption. I think that the hot take is still and always going to be Francesca and Michaela. I'm still on board with that. But yeah, how are you feeling?
I'm still feeling pretty good about Francesca and Michaela. Because again, Julia Quinn said, like, she commented on something saying, like, yeah, we're going to see Philip and Eloise. When? Who's to say? It's like,
Yeah.
she's still kind of like, she's been giving us like these little like micro confirmations that like Philoise is happening, but not too much to run with and assume that it's next season. So I don't know. I still think, yeah, Francesca and Michaela, I think they've got something in their back pocket. And I definitely think that there's going to be some kind of reveal, obviously, at the end of season 4, revealing them as next. But yeah, I'm still feeling pretty good. Pretty good about it.
Yeah. Well, and it does definitely feel like Julia Quinn. So she posted like a collage of her on set with Claudia Jesse and them like talking about like To Serve Philip with Love, like the book. And it feels a little, and her response to people was like, oh yeah, we're gonna, whenever their turn is. It does feel a little bit like she is constantly trying to remind, like, Phillies fans, we haven't forgot about you. Like, when Francesca and Michaela comes first, that doesn't mean that we don't value Philip and Eloise, because we do, and we love them, and we're going to see them, and it feels very much like she's trying to soften that blow for Phillies stands, because I know that it does suck to have to wait another year for a story that you love, but that we know that we're going to have season 5 and 6, I just feel is so comforting, because it's like, we know we're getting both. So whether we have to wait a little extra time for our personal favorite, that's okay. We'll get both of them. So I just feel really comforted, and I think Julia Quinn is trying to comfort the whole fandom with this.
Yeah, I think so too. And honestly, I just find that, we've been through this with Benedict. And from like a marketing and like PR standpoint, I think that the build up to it was very successful. So you've got to, I don't know. I feel like it worked. It worked for them to skip over Benedict, because look how excited and ready we are for this season, and the Benefi stands are like, this is our moment, So I can just see it being like people are going to just like ache for Phillies after season 4. So it's just going to keep everybody like locked in until season 6. So yeah, I feel like, it makes sense. I feel like that's the move. So hopefully we find out soon. But if anything, I'm sure we'll find out at the end of season 4. So
Yeah, for sure. Oh, I'm so excited. I can't wait.
I know.
It's going to be here before we know it. Like, it's going to fly by.
Yeah. Because, like, listen, let's be real right now. We're in the Burr months. Look at us. September, October, like we're getting there. It's almost 2026. Let's say the truth. It's almost 2026.
Yeah.
Like, this is gonna fly by, and I'm telling you, when they wrap, well, wait. Tomorrow's when Wednesday part 2 is coming out. Season 3 part 2. I am convinced that once they wrap promoting Wednesday, that we're going to get something. Because obviously they're going to jump into the Stranger Things boat. But I think we're going to get a date, like, in the next few weeks. Like, I'm convinced.
Yeah. No, I think you're probably right, which is just so nuts. And I think we're going to get, like, heavy promotion starting in, like, November, December, which is nuts. So it's going to be right around the corner.
We're totally going to get a trailer on Christmas.
Oh, 100%. 100% trailer on Christmas.
Oh my god. I'm so excited. I'm so excited.
It's fine. It's fine.
Everything's fine.
With all of that insanely exciting news, we still have more excitement to come with our interview with Vanessa Coffey. So stick around, because truly this one is incredible. So join us with Vanessa. Well, guys, welcome. Today we have with us Vanessa Coffey, who is an intimacy coordinator for incredible shows like The Buccaneers, Outlander, Blood of My Blood. We are so excited to chat with you today. Thank you so much for joining us, Vanessa.
Thank you so much for having me.
First off, I kind of wanted to address the whole idea of like intimacy coordination. I feel like it's sort of a new term that's popped on the scene in the last few years. So will you kind of explain like what is that role? And we very much on this podcast believe it's such an important role. So yeah, kind of tell us a little bit about that if you could.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, it really kind of started post Harvey Weinstein. So that is possibly the only silver lining that came from all of that as far as productions go. So really, we came onto the scene for productions post 2018. So that's how recent the role is. That doesn't mean that there weren't people who were doing things that were kind of related. So, you know, whether people were approaching things through movement direction or through stunts, like trying to keep actors safe in terms of movement, how scenes were crafted safely, people were doing that. But it really came to fruition in 2018. And I mean, the first person who ever went on a show as an intimacy coordinator was a woman named Alicia Rodis in the States on a show called The Deuce. So that was first ever time that somebody was credited kind of going on set for one of these scenes. And I remember at the time seeing Alicia doing that, and I mean, I can talk a little bit about what I was doing over this side of the pond, but I got in touch with her because I was so excited when I saw what she was doing and that she had a title, because I was doing similar work, but was really for friends. So I didn't have... I didn't have a title. I was called all sorts of things: intimacy advisor, intimacy coach. You know, there wasn't really a confirmed kind of title for the work that we did. So we started a dialogue really at that point, and things went from there.
That's incredible.
Would you like me to tell you how I came in? Because it's a bit left field.
Yeah, absolutely. Please do.
So it was, and it kind of feeds a lot into probably the stuff that we're talking about anyway, because it leads us to Outlander ultimately. So I was a dancer for most of my life, and then I worked as a lawyer. I was a mergers and acquisitions lawyer. I also trained as an actor. So, very random set of skills. I don't even know that they're skills. They were just things I trained in, at least. So, you know, so I had these things kicking about, and I went back in and was lecturing at the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland, which is where I'd trained as an actor. And because I'd been a lawyer, people, and a mover, people used to come back in and talk with me about their nudity clauses in their contracts. And ask me to help them unpick those. So we would sit down and go through that. One particular actor asked me to go through and help her work out what she could push back on, what she could say no to. And then when she went on set, she also said to me, look, I'm just not sure that we're quite going to, that I entirely trust that we're going to stick to this. So I went on, and it was a simulated sexual assault scene that she was in, and she and the other guy who were doing that scene really had no idea what they were doing, which was fair enough. I mean, in movement terms, they were like, we don't know, we haven't had this conversation with the director. He's just kind of said, go for it. But we don't really know what we're doing. So we started to unpick the choreography of the thing, where hands were going to, just looking at consent, where hands were going to go, how we were going to tell that story as well, really importantly. Like, what do we need for the camera, that the camera needs to see in order to sell that? So that was the first time of kind of going on a production, and then things rolled from there. And then Sam Hewen came to do a talk at the Conservatoire. I was like, what is this that the students are telling me you do? So we started chatting, and he said, okay, I think we need you on our show. So that was that.
Well, and he has spoken, my goodness, so highly of you. That was the first time I had heard of you, was him talking about it. And, I don't know how much we go into it, whatever, but I feel like, Outlander is amazing, and the intimacy is so incredible, but I also feel like having you is such an important thing. And so, very glad you're on the show, and I feel like it's such a wonderful thing to create as an industry standard. So...
Well, thank you, Cass. I mean, and the thing is, we can be really realistic about it. A lot of Katrina and Sam's, very high level intimacy was seasons 1 through 3. There's a lot of stuff that was in there. And then really I came on board from season 6. So the characters' intimacy is very different by the time we meet them in season 6, understandably, because they've been together a lot longer, they've been through a lot together, they've aged together, so we want to be able to tell that story, not, have them have the kind of, shall we say, very limber sex scenes that we saw them have early in their relationship, because that equally wouldn't be truthful to a couple who have gone through everything they've been through.
Yeah. Not as many carpet burns in season 6 and 7.
No, not
season
quite.
1.
No.
Makes total sense.
I find that so interesting, though, the whole aspect of you being a dancer and an actor, but then bringing in that legal side of things. Like, I find that so fascinating, because what we've been hearing about intimacy coordinators and the importance of having them on set is that it's all a choreography. And to have that dance background, understanding what the actors need to do in order to perform, plus the legal aspect of it, I find that, like, that's such a perfect mix to understand exactly how to curate these moments, whether they're good moments, bad moments, whatever it may be. I find that so interesting.
I mean, Deborah, I never thought that I would be in a situation where I might be able to use, like, literally all of the things that I'd trained in. And this is the one weird thing that does at some level use every single element of that, which is great.
That's awesome. Well, so we know that you've worked on both seasons of the Buccaneers. So how is it doing the intimacy coordination for a show that has such a strong female gaze? And how do you then bring that and reflect that in the intimacy scenes that we have in those seasons?
This is so lovely to be able to talk about, because obviously the intimacy is very different in Buccaneers, and actually it's different, I would say, even from season 1 to season 2. Mm-hmm. I think there's a growth actually between seasons. I think we see a lot more intimacy in season 2 from those characters, and there's a greater degree of it, and I think that's the maturity of the characters, aside from anything else as well. Yes, you've got, it's very female gaze, as you know. We've got Catherine, who's writing, Beth, who's producing. For some of those episodes, we also had Rachel directing. So, you've got, and female DOP as well, which is very unusual. Unfortunately, it's still very unusual to have a female DOP, especially one who also can operate. So that is literally female gaze. We are looking at it like there's a female behind the lens. It's that, to me, was really interesting to explore. It is very female focused. I mean, the intimacy that's in there isn't just, it's also platonic. There's a lot of hugs, there's a lot of intimacy that happens between the characters that, is not necessarily romantic love, but is something else entirely. So that in itself is really lovely to explore. And then we see everything through how the female characters are approaching these relationships. Like, yeah, of course we see Theo, we see Guy, we see all these men who come in and out of their lives, but it is about the women's relationship with those men. So it does change things. It changes the conversation as well, and I feel like the actors also have a lot of say as women, as powerful women, who are then sort of in that space asking questions about their characters and how we are to approach the intimacy.
Yeah, I guess that would deepen the connection too with the character that they're playing, and it gives them more freedom to discover the root decisions that they're making. So that's really
100%. I mean, this is something I feel really passionate about, and that we have always trained our actors within actor training to explore character through all sorts of means, whether it's movement or, vocal, or, there's all these different elements that we ask somebody to unpack a character through. We never look at it, or very rarely have we looked at it through the lens of intimacy. But we can tell so much about a person with where they're at, through their intimacy, how they behave in an intimate environment. If we think about either if it's a predatory male or a romantic male, or equally, a dominant female, or whatever that is, there's things that will come out in an intimate relationship that will tell us who that person really is at their core, even if they're exploring something sexually that's very different to, who they are as we see them as people in the rest of the show.
Right. And I feel like that's making me think, and I'm sure Cass will agree, like, I just think of Honoria's journey from season 1 to 2. Like, my goodness, when you put it through that lens, like, you can see that what she's experiencing is changing and developing her character through the end of season 2. So I love that.
Yeah, I mean, how, like, that moment where she finally stands up to her mum is just so brilliant. And that happens exactly as you say there, Deborah, because of the intimacy, because of that intimacy that that the two of them have together. Suddenly she has this bravery, this sense of like, no, I can surprise you as a person. This is who I am, actually. So yeah, so it comes out of their beautiful relationship.
Those intimate moments, like, I feel like so often there's this idea that, like, people are like, oh, well, you could just skip the sex scenes or whatever, and I'm like, no, but if they're there for a purpose, like, they're there for a reason, like, they're telling part of your story, which I guess connects with my next question. For Theo and Lizzie are such a big couple in season 2, and they obviously have some very expressive intimacy scenes. So how was that for, kind of crafting the intimacy for this new couple? I mean, season 2 was a fast-paced season. So how do you craft that? How does that come out of this authentic place to make this couple?
I mean, a lot of that is in the kind of the lead up, in that the great thing with the intimacy on Buccaneers is that, we will always get time. I always get time with the actors to have a discussion with them about boundaries, about what they're comfortable with. So there's there's that consent side of things. There's also, what do you want to do with this scene? Like, what are you interested in exploring from an intimate perspective, so that you hear all of that stuff as well before we're even in a room. And we always get rehearsal time as well, which is brilliant for those scenes, because rehearsal will really tell us, I mean, even where, obviously, things like where to put the camera and that kind of thing, but it's such a strong moment of where we discover what the story is, because each of them will have a different idea from their own character perspective about, well, I think it's this, or I think it's this. What if we try this? Okay, and who's on top? Because that's going to tell a different story. How people grasp one another. If hands are on backs of heads and pulling in, like, is that passion or is it control? What is it? We get to unpack all of that stuff, because we, the viewer, will read something onto all of those tiny, tiny movements that suddenly build up to be this big piece of choreography. So yeah, I feel like that's something that we'll always talk through with the director, the actors, me in the room, like, what is the story we're telling here? How are we going to tell it? And it can be very detailed. It might be down to things like the quality of the thrusting, if we've got thrusting involved in a scene, like what that looks like, or if you've got Honoria and Mabel, again, like with their sex scenes, it has a different feel, because to me they are the couple who are really in love. They they're they are sort of the true love story in some respects, I think. So how do we tell their intimate moments so that we really are comparing with, say, Theo and Lizzie, which feels very passionate, is illicit, so that adds its own element. There's the danger element of it, so does that add something to the excitement for those characters? If they're about to be caught any minute, what does that mean for them? So I think it's also nice to explore how we kind of juxtapose character intimacy as well and make things very different. So Theo Lizzie feels very different from, Nan Theo.
Yeah, absolutely. And we learn so much from that. That's so fascinating. I love that.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting to me that Theo falls in love with Lizzie in some ways without expecting to at all, and that comes from this sort of the intimacy, the passion of the intimacy, and then actually realizing that there's maybe more to it than just it being purely kind of carnal.
Yeah, that's such a great evolution.
Yeah.
Of that intimacy. Yeah.
And I feel like, too, you spoke about this earlier a little bit, but, intimacy coordination, it doesn't always necessarily mean sex scenes. So, I think of the Buccaneers specifically because, like you said, it's a story about, like, the girls, the ladies, the best friends, and, like, sometimes they're all, like, on the same bed together, and they're in each other's space a lot. Mm-hmm. So can you talk about how intimacy coordinators would tackle something like that that's not necessarily romantic?
Yeah, and it depends on the level of intimacy, but we even talk about like parent-child intimacy on that show, because there are embraces where a mum might hop into bed alongside her daughter and things like that, and how we create that intimacy and make it really comfortable for people. And I think that's really about setting it up right from the start. So it's about how we have the conversations, about checking in with your fellow performer to say, okay, are there any boundaries I need to be aware of? Anything, and generally what I would do is a red, amber, and green approach to touch, so that it's like, we just tell our scene partner, this is all green, amber, or it might be red, depending who we're working with, and it might be different with different scene partners too. So, your level of comfort might be different with one person versus another, so we don't make any assumptions, I guess, about then, that somebody is going to feel exactly the same way for all scenes, or that they want to perform nudity for all scenes equally. So it's about having the confidence to kind of stand with your scene partner and go, okay, what do I need to know ahead of this? Also because, people have allergies as well these days. Like, my son has peanut allergies. So if somebody were to eat peanuts or peanut butter before they're about to do a scene where they've got their arms draped around him, that would be a problem. Yeah. So we also need to be having those conversations with people to be like, anything I need to be aware of as a scene partner before I'm about to be in close proximity with you. So, yeah.
That is not something I ever considered, and that's so fascinating. Like with allergies and stuff, and like, that's so fascinating. It just broke my brain when you said that.
Well, it was also that I weirdly had like 3 people in 3 weeks who had egg allergies, like quite severe egg allergies, who were like, yeah, don't have eggs anywhere near me. So, and I think we're getting better at that stuff because, on call sheets we'll sometimes note if somebody's got an allergy that there's not to be any consumption of a particular item or whatever. But if people aren't doing that yet, then we have to be taking care of our actors. So yeah, sometimes that stuff does fall to the intimacy coordinator. It seems a little unusual, I guess, but as soon as you're in that close proximity with somebody else, which is our job, it's about making that as safe as possible, physically and mentally.
Well, and to jump kind of back to Outlander, so you worked on 6 and 7, which 6 is really interesting to me because obviously you had so many challenges. So talking about like all the things that an intimacy coordinator has to do. But season 6, you had COVID, you had Katrina was pregnant, like so many things going on. So can you speak a little bit to, I'm sure the many, many things that were on your plate that season?
Yeah, no problem. And so I worked on 6, 7, and 8. Obviously, I can't really talk about 8 yet, and then Blood of My Blood as well, which, we can potentially touch on some of. Great. Yes, so season 6, what a world we were in with wearing masks on set. So, and that really, to me, I was like, gosh, how are we going to have intimate conversations? Because they're intricate conversations that happen. And, you're in a world where suddenly you're like this with somebody. So for me, I headed out and was always like I would take my mask off, stand 2 meters away from people who I was going to be working with to say, this is who I am, so that you know who the person is behind the mask. Because so often people are very in their lane and in their zone when they're on set. And, it can be really easy to forget that people don't actually know what you look like. And that does create a sense of intimacy when you know what someone looks like. So yes, so we were doing that. But yes, having to be tested 5 times a week and, up to 5 times a week at one point with our PCR testing. Gosh, that is so weird, even having to talk about that. I remember one very enthusiastic nurse in particular who was very keen on the old swabs of the nose. Anyway, so
Not fun.
yeah, that was a weird environment. But also to come into that season, because it was me being introduced to cast for the first time in that environment. The only person, I'd met Paul Gorman was one of my students at the conservatoire, so I knew him.
That's so fabulous.
So I knew him. I knew Joanne Thompson, who was also a student. And then I knew Sam, obviously, who, but they might be the only 3 people I'd met without a mask on in real life, because other things happened on Zoom. So you're trying to create a sense of, intimacy, of being able to work in that kind of way with people you haven't met before. It was challenging for everybody. I found it interesting but very challenging working, for the first time on that production, with all of the COVID protocols in place and having to do intimacy with COVID protocols in place.
Yeah. Well, and the intimacy doesn't stop. Like, you still have, all of those, whether they're romantic scenes or, personal, interpersonal relationships, like, that's part of a story that still gets told. You just have to do it creatively when you have all of these extra restrictions.
Exactly. And that might mean that, for a big production like Outlander that has the budget to be able to do, thankfully, PCR testing, you can keep people, knock on wood, relatively safe because you are regularly testing. Whereas, there were other productions that I was working on at the same time that didn't have the kind of money to be able to do regular testing. So the intimacy was really creative. It had to be told through things like handholds. Not that people got to sanitize afterwards, but, how we tell things that can be distanced with touch. And that was a really big deal for people too, because, it also kind of blows my mind that people were having to maintain a 2-meter distance everywhere except on set, where they have to come back to being really close to somebody else and pretend that's not happening outside. So there's an extra challenge. Like I see, there were a lot of actors who are coming out of their training in 2021 who weren't used to being in close proximity with other people at all. So with them trying to then work with them on intimacy, it's a totally different kettle of fish to the people who already had the experience of that previously. But Cass, to answer your question, there's also yes, Katrina was pregnant. So,
Yeah.
so, and I'll never forget what she said to me, which was, so we were doing a scene and we were, so it was a sex scene. So it was a Claire Jamie scene, and it's the one that happens in episode 7, Jamie Payne's episode, and we leave them as the beating heart on the bed as we pan away. But there's some really lovely close-up shots of hands on thighs, of of bodies being grasped and all the rest of it. And Jamie had an idea to do specials of hands on body and how we tell that, because originally everyone was like, how are we going to do this? And Katrina just said to me, my legs aren't pregnant. And I was like, no, you're right. Your legs aren't pregnant. But Katrina is a very lucky individual as well, in that, my legs, when I was pregnant, probably were pregnant.
I was going to say, I can confirm. My legs
Pregnant legs. She did not. She had elongated, wonderful, the wonderful legs that she has. So we were able to storytell using hands, legs, And, you know, we were able to use Sam, of course, because he was able to cover as well, you know. So we were creative within all of that. But I mean, there are some moments where we had another scene that was in the stables, where they have sex in the stables. Yeah. And I mean, she had to use like a blanket to kind of cover her for a lot of that, where she's got something over an arm, because at that point she was really showing. So, you know, we've got to use masking techniques for all of that. But yeah, I mean, even down to things like that I'd never considered before, positioning for pregnancy. You know, how we make sure that somebody stays literally safe and comfortable, depending where they're at in their stage of pregnancy. Yeah.
So many layers to consider, my goodness.
For sure.
Well, I guess then skipping forward to season 7 of Outlander, there is not quite it's more grief stricken than it is romantic, but there's that scene with Claire and John, and after, you know, Claire has the belief that Jamie has passed on, and then they sleep together, and that is definitely a raw and emotional scene, and almost at times hard to watch because you feel the pain that they both have in losing Jamie. So how do you address, you know, scenes like that are very much pain driven?
Yeah, so that one was a tough one to work on, really tough, because, you know, you've got to get the tone of it right, because you don't want to, you know, in some ways it was important not to sexualize it, but for it to still be a sex scene, because that's what's true to the book as well. So, you know, and people who'd read the books beforehand were like, how are they going to tell this? This is going to be interesting to sort of resolve. So I think we hit good middle ground there, where it was like, in some ways it was sexy, but it absolutely did come from a night of drunkenness, of grief, of just, you know, we talked a lot about needing to be in the present, like that this person could just have you be in the present, that's what the sex is. And also because they're both, and they say this, that they're both having sex with him in some ways, so that is mentally where they're at. So that one was lots of conversations about how we get there. We did a couple of rehearsals of that scene because it was so, I mean, the whole thing, there's hardly any dialogue in that scene. It is very much about the movement, about how he moves towards her in that space, you know, so that it's not threatening, it's, you know, placatory, like he cares about her as well, about making sure she's okay, and how she then, whether she moves back towards him like almost as an injured animal, like, you know, how they treat one another, how much space he needs to cross, and how much she's willing to move towards him as well. So there were lots of really interesting and in-depth conversations about, you know, grief, loss, sex within all of that. And we talked about sex and death going together quite a lot. And when we shot it, gosh, I mean, that was, and this is a personal one for me, but I had just had a baby. I mean, I was 5 weeks, you know, I was back on set 5 weeks after having given birth.
Oh my God.
So, and you'll know from that scene, I mean, Katrina, my God, she gives it her all in that scene. And it was really powerful, really moving. And she was crying. So I can't tell you, I mean, I was like this the whole time. I had to have the breast pumps on because, you know, like physiologically, my body was responding to that scene.
Yeah.
So it was a challenge. It was a challenge at many levels. Yeah, I think it was a tough day out.
That is so relatable for me anyway. That's so like, oh my gosh, the emotions are just coming out everywhere.
Well, and yeah, you're hormonal at that time too. And then,
Yeah.
and if you've got something like that, I mean, I'd spent 5 weeks inside with a baby at that point, really. And then suddenly you're out with adults and you're like, gosh. And then there's this beautiful, powerful, emotional scene. And when they really gave it their all, I mean, both of them were incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. That's, yeah, a scene that affected, I mean, everybody so much. It was so powerful. So you all did such an amazing job with it, because I think we as a fandom were worried. Like, how do you do this? How do you, and you guys, gold stars across the board. It was
Oh,
amazing.
thank you, Kat. I mean, people were worried about it, definitely, even, because, and it is interesting seeing the comments even afterwards, because, it does divide fans. People are like, how could she sleep with somebody else when, but she doesn't know Jamie's still alive, and she is deep within grieving, and I think probably anything is forgivable at that point, so yeah, it's really interesting that people have such strong reactions to that scene.
Yeah,
Oh, for sure.
definitely. Well, with, reactions online and all that, there's a lot of reactions now with Blood of My Blood finally being out. So much excitement. We are so excited about it. We have been watching, and we are just so thrilled to see the continuation of the story in its prequel form. So what about that show was the most exciting for you to work on? Something new but also familiar. How was that?
Oh, it's interesting. I think it is so interesting coming, because we shoot it there's a lot of the same locations, a lot of the studios that we'll use are the same, so it's like, okay, that feels familiar, the world is familiar, but it's completely different. So you don't have that familiarity of cast anymore, so you're back to the beginning of getting to work from the get-go of how we're going to set the tone on this for the whole of the show going forward. So I mean, I think that's really exciting to be in right from this time, season 1, to set all of that sort of beautiful groundwork up so that they can, really feel, hopefully, that they're telling that story through consent, that the actors are consenting to tell a really beautiful story. I think I don't know what the most, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's still coming your way, guys.
I bet.
Yeah, I read the article that said there's the 6-minute sex scene. Yes, I'm familiar.
Yeah, I'm surprised it's 6. I mean, I think they might have underestimated that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's good to
Yeah.
know.
I don't know, maybe, yeah, but anyway, yes, it's, there's a lot coming your way, so we could definitely have a chat about all of that afterwards. The thing that I think is so interesting, though, is, I mean, the casting for that, and this has been said online, is phenomenal. They did such an amazing job of casting both sets of parents.
Wow. Yeah.
Just incredible. They really embody the parents. Like you meet them in person, and they're very, very similar to their counterparts. So, but it's also weird because, of course, they're younger actors, but they're playing the parents of. So, it's a bit of a...
Yeah, it's confusing at times. You're like, oh yes, Brian. Okay, not Jamie. This is weird.
Exactly.
Well, and also the actor's name is Jamie, which I have called him Jamie so many. I'm like, Jamie, no, that's Brian. Just kidding. Like,
No, I know, don't. That to me blew my mind, because we've got, it's H's and J's, because we've got Hermione, Harriet, Jeremy, and Jamie. I was like, no more H's and J's. This is a lot. And then, yes, you do have characters you've also got Sam, who is playing Dougal. So you've got Sam who's playing Dougal, and you've got Jamie who's playing Brian. I mean, just what a world.
So confusing.
Yeah.
We love
Very
it. We love it. It's so fun to dive into it already. So can't wait to see what's next.
And again, we'll see what the different characters' intimacy looks like, because again, they've each got a different palette, I would say, like the different couples, or, you know, I mean, you've already seen Dougal, for example. So, yes. You know, he has a particular style, preference. So, you know, again, we'll juxtapose that with like all of those different couples and how we layer all of that so that the intimacy is different for everybody.
Yeah. When you spoke too about like with the different couples, and I was so struck by Henry and Julia and their intimacy, and so I thought it was really fascinating when they finally do meet each other in episode 2, how their intimacy has been established through letter writing, which is incredibly intimate, but also hasn't been physically, they haven't even seen each other. And yet when they go to like sleep together for the first time, it's incredibly intimate and they're so familiar. And so I would love to know more about like, what is the thought process? How did that come about for creating that intimacy? Because it feels so unique.
Yeah. So, I mean, and another, just as an aside, H and J. It's another.
Thinking that.
Exactly.
Just to confuse things completely. Yeah, so I mean, again, that was really a conversation where we sat down with both of the actors. It was me, Jamie Payne, again, so directing Ep 1 and Ep 2, where we sort of sat down and we were like, okay, how does this work? How does this work? Because we need the kiss on the steps to be kind of mind-blowing, but also then it needs to lead somewhere as well. And how is this possible off the back of letter writing? And really it was, so Jamie came in with images of what he thought it could possibly look like between the two of them. So we all sort of explored that and thought, yeah, that is actually really, that's a really beautiful way to tell it. I mean, they've both had hardships. I mean, there's so many things that have gone into the letters. I think it was just, I don't know that I've got a good way of answering your question, Cass, except to say that it is a really different lead-in. We don't have like longing eye contact and or shared breath or any of those sorts of things that we might usually see couples engage in before we get to that point. It goes from 0 to 100. Yeah, and so it was a challenge
for sure. Well, and I thought it was so interesting too with, you talked about earlier about like positioning and everything that you have, like Julia on top. And it felt very Claire to me, where I'm like, this is a woman who knows what she likes in the bedroom and she is ready to take charge. And I mean, was that a conscious like parallel to draw?
We consciously put her on top. Yes. Because it did feel like she should be taking control in that moment, and she is a woman who is in touch with her sexuality in the same way as we ultimately find Claire is. And I think it shows in some ways like a hint of his vulnerability as well, and yet strength at the same time, because a man who is willing to have a strong woman on top still has some strength about him. So there's a lot of it was a very conscious choice, definitely, to have her on top, and I do think it was very reminiscent of some of the scenes that we've seen for Claire, for sure. There's something that's very powerful too about him sitting up towards her, because they stay in very close connection. So that you're capable of an embrace, you're capable of a kiss, you're capable of all those things. It's not just, to put it in a crass way, it's not her riding him. It's actually about a sharing of souls, which is what we were talking about, that these people have met their soulmate. That's why they're capable of recognizing one another. It's that instant bond.
With that, which is so interesting, like I feel like famously sex scenes are awkward to film, like everybody always talks about that.
They do.
So I'm curious, like, how, I mean, obviously there's lots of prep work and everything, but how do you combat that to create something that looks so good on camera? Like, what, do you have specific strategies? Is it just situation by situation?
It can be. I mean, I actually, so I, I'm an outlier here. I actually think they're amazing. Like, I love filming those scenes. I think they're great
Okay.
to film if they're done well. Like, they're awkward when people haven't had the conversations or if they're approaching things just as themselves and not through character. But otherwise, I'm like, God, we get to tell, we get to tell 3 scenes worth of stuff in a moment if we do it properly. Because all the words in the world aren't going to make up for this one intimate beat that we get to sell here. I think laughter is a big key in how we behave in the room, and I'm not talking about making crass jokes or anything like that. It's definitely not that. I would say it's the opposite of that. But keeping the space light, because sometimes you look at it and you're like, what we ask actors to do is sometimes pretty ridiculous. And I've got actors who are wearing things like there's yoga matting, and I mean this is the case in most of the sex scenes I've worked on. There's a piece of yoga matting that will be taped to them, particularly if I can't get a cushion, but a physical cushion between the actors. They will always have a barrier between them. But yeah, you have a piece of yoga matting that sits between you. And we call it a vajoga. Because and just the word alone, people will be like, do we have the vajogas today? I'm like, yep, it's a vajoga day. And so, got to go to the bathroom before we strap our actors into the vajogas, and they're like, here we go with the vajogas, So we end up in this situation where it's really quite ridiculous. Or, I make sure that the actors will high five out. And again, that sounds really twee, but that they high five out between takes so that they're back in their personal body, ready to receive notes. They're covered, they are back to being the actor rather than the character. And we just make that delineation really, really clear. So if those things are done well, then to my mind, there isn't the awkwardness. One time when it's not awkward, but it's hilarious, is if we ask characters to go in, if we do a pickup moment, and they have to pick up from the moment that starts an orgasm. Because if you've got lines that lead you in, you can get there and it's fine. But if you just start with the breath, then actors will lose it. That has been my experience most of the time.
And that would be not an easy one to just jump in with.
An easy one, because you're just like, or you have to go in, and people will sometimes have to pick up the breath work in ADR, so in the audio afterwards. So if you're going into a studio and just having to do, the breath work that goes, you're like, oh my God, what am I doing? So I think it's about how we do the scenes, how we make the environment feel comfortable, also that people can say no at any point, because just because they've said yes at the start of the day doesn't mean they're going to be okay by the finish. There's lots of things that we think about too, I guess, that make it less awkward, like what time of day we do the scene. I tend to do it first thing in the morning, which sounds really odd, but actors have showered, they've brushed their teeth, they haven't just had lunch, and they're having to take their clothes off having just had lunch. It's not a great time to ask people to do that, and does feel awkward. So there's some of those things that we start to sort of build in to hopefully take a bit of that awkwardness away.
Oh, well, and clearly, like, you think about it so much, and like I was so struck by the like high-fiving out and to change, like, to have that boundary so clearly. And I just feel like intimacy coordination, obviously it's so good on sets. Like, I feel like there's so much we can learn about consent in the real world from the way that like things are, and so I just love how thoughtful that is. So yeah, it's fascinating.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the practices of I it's so interesting, because for me, having worked as an actor and having seen what happens on sets, we don't have a lot of the time to take care of our actors. We do during the scene, of course, a lot of the time, but then straight after the scene, we're on to the next scene. there's no turnaround time. So, you know, I hope intimacy coordination kind of brings a level of care that's not just purely about the intimacy, but is also about what happens after the intimacy. How we get people out of the scene, how we de-roll them for the day, whether that's a traumatic scene or whether it's, you know, a straightforward romantic sex scene or whatever that is, but that we take time to kind of unpack it at the finish to help that person leave the space. And that, to me, it was a classic example of the Lord John Clare scene, having conversations with both of those actors after they'd shot that scene so that they don't feel that they are leaving to go home and that the only way they're going to be able to manage that is to go home and have a bottle of wine or something, you know? You want to create kind of safe, healthy practices for people to leave a space comfortably. I mean, you know, on another show I worked on, we had somebody who was being tortured, like obviously, you know, simulated torture, but still it was really interesting speaking to them because she said to me, she was like, but my body doesn't know in some ways that this is simulated because she's having to breathe in the same way. She's putting herself in complete panic mode bodily. Like, so all the physiological effects were kind of the same. So then if you've been shaking that whole time and you've got the adrenaline going and everything else, what do you do with all of that before you leave for the day if we've had you in that space for 4 hours shooting a scene? So yeah, so it's also that stuff I think that's important for us to help actors with or to help unpack.
That makes a lot of sense. This whole world is so fascinating, so important, and, you know, it pays off on screen. We can see, you know, that all the work that's gone into it, and it's comforting to know that, you know, these stories are as intimate as we would want them to be, but also they're a safe space for whoever's performing them. So really, really love this conversation. We're so grateful to you for coming on, and I guess a good way to end would be if there's anything that you can tell us that we can look forward to, you know, whether it be Blood of My Blood, Outlander, any other projects you've got going.
Yeah, there's a few. There are a few that are coming up, but I think probably, I mean, the one that is so clearly on the horizon that will be of interest are the remaining episodes of Blood of My Blood, and there is a lot of stuff in there to unpack, I'm sure, at the finish of the season. And yeah, of course, we've got Outlander season 8 still to come.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll get a 3rd season of the Buccaneers. That would be good. Yeah,
Yes.
Fingers crossed. And I mean, aside from anything else, so the other weird one that I worked on, which is not the genre at all that we've been talking about tonight, but I worked on 28 Years Later, the film. The zombie film. Well, not that we can say the Z word. I mean, they are called The Infected. So yeah, so you know, there's stuff like that. There's the Bone Temple that is the second film of that's going to be coming out. So yeah, there's
Very cool.
bits and pieces.
Yeah. Well, we are on the edge of our seat for all the things. We will, I would love to check in with you again when we can go back and look at like Blood of My Blood and Outlander season 8, and because I'm sure we will have lots of thoughts and questions. So
Yeah, and I would love to hear them because, you know, especially hearing particularly from fans, you know, like yourselves who are unpacking those episodes, because I mean, the depth that you guys go to in unpacking episodes, and I'm like, God, I didn't even think about that. And my focus tends to be pretty narrow, but yours is actually really broad. It's like all the things. It's great.
oh, well, thank you.
Thank you. We have lots of fun with it. So that was our interview with Vanessa Coffey. It was such an amazing conversation. I remember getting out of that conversation with Cass and just being like, that was crazy. Like one of my favorite interviews ever, because she was so down to earth. She has such an inspiring journey, and like she's just so badass. Like it was so insightful, so cool to see how, you know, an intimacy coordinator, you know, became a thing and how it's important moving forward. So yeah, what a great conversation with Vanessa. And next week we will be diving into more of her work,
hopefully. We will be going through episodes 4 to 6 of Blood on My Blood. We'll be covering all of that. And yeah, stay tuned for next week.